that my voice is clearly audible and you can see the first slide.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. So after we are done with the class, like we've been following a routine from the past few classes, I'll be asking you the questions which were previously dictated. So make sure you guys are ready to answer those questions. If I call out your number and if you're not answering the question, then you'll be marked absent. So just make sure you're alert, right? So we'll go ahead with these classes. I would say the topics that we're repeating now are very important for your final exam, and the questions that we're dictating also, make sure you don't miss out on those questions by the least. Okay? So we'll start with the class for today. If I'm not audible at any point or if you're not able to see the slides, please let me know. So the topic for today is retinal vessel occlusions. So before we go into occlusions and its pathology, I'll give you a quick recap and understanding of vascular anatomy so that you understand the pathology a little bit. Ophthalmic artery is the first branch, intracranial branch of the internal carotid artery, like you can see here. After it comes out, it gives the central retinal artery, which goes and pierces the optic nerve from behind the or the undersurface of the optic nerve at about 10 mm behind the posterior part of the globe, and it goes inside to supply the layers of the retina. Apart from that, it also, ophthalmic artery also gives rise to posterior ciliary arteries, which are 2 to 3 in number. And these posterior ciliary arteries give rise to 10 to 20 short posterior ciliary. They're called short because when they're supplying just the posterior part, they're called a short posterior ciliary because their course is short. And there are 2 to 3 long posterior ciliary arteries which course forward into the near the anterior chamber. So that's why they're called as long posterior ciliary artery. Other than that, like I said, the short posterior ciliary artery will supply the choroidal layer and also gives rise to this circle of Zinn or Haller, which supplies the optic nerve head. Like you can see here, the anastomosis between short posterior ciliary arteries. Apart from that, there is a cilio-retinal artery that is seen in this picture here. I will let you know the importance, but you should know that its origin is from the posterior ciliary circulations and not from the retinal central retinal artery. Like I said, central retinal artery courses through the optic nerve. It goes from the center of the optic nerve and supplies the layers of the retina. You can see here that the retinal central retinal artery lies in the superficial layers of the retina, or rather the inner layers of the retina. Coming to venular anatomy, the terminal branches will go into the quadrant branches, that is superior and inferiorly, like if you divide the fundus into superior, inferior parts and temporal and nasal parts, the vein drains from all the areas via superior temporal, inferior temporal, inferonasal and superinasal. All these drain into a small hemicentral retinal vein, that is superior quadrant and inferior quadrant central retinal veins are present. They go into the central retinal vein proper, okay, which is right beside the central retinal artery in the optic nerve. Also, what we need to remember is once the central retinal artery has given its branches and there are 10 layers of the retina, there are multiple capillary plexus that are present at various levels of the retinal layers. There is superficial, middle and deep capillary plexus, and below that there is choroidal circulation. So what you need to get oriented that the inner retinal layers are supplied by the central retinal artery branches and the outer retinal layers are supplied by the choroidal arteries or the choroidal circulation. And the fovea is an avascular zone, like you can see in this picture clearly. So maintenance of the foveal contour and foveal anatomy is very important for a person's vision. So we'll move on to the arterial occlusions. Arterial occlusions has multiple etiological factors, the most common one being the emboli. Emboli can come from prosthetic valves that are present in the heart. They can come most commonly from the atheromatous plaques that are present in the carotids. So atherosclerosis is one of the important underlying factor that might lead to emboli that might cause arterial occlusions. Apart from that, arteritis. Arteritis is nothing but inflammation that is present in the artery, and it is a systemic condition. It's not just present in the eye, it is a systemic condition. And most common type that affects the retinal vasculature is giant cell arteritis. So you need to remember that. Apart from that, thrombophilic conditions. There are multiple hereditary thrombophilias that have increased prothrombotic factors or decreased antithrombotic factors present in the circulation that will cause more amount of thrombosis. So that is the thrombophilic nature that is present in the body due to deficiency of factors that might lead to arterial occlusions. Apart from that, angiospasms, that is when the vessel tends to narrow down due to multiple other factors. It might also lead to occlusions, and raised IOP also causes narrowing up of the arteries. In 20 to 30% of these cases, the emboli are visible. Here you can see a platelet fibrin emboli that is present here. Here is a cholesterol emboli, which is most commonly atherosclerotic in nature. Like you can see the white dots here. And calcific emboli are little larger and they cause more severe type of obstructions. So, like we've entered the arterial occlusions, they can be central retinal artery occlusions, they can be a branched retinal artery occlusions, or they can be a cilio-retinal artery occlusion. The anatomy of cilio-retinal artery is important for you to understand its occlusion and its pathology. So, the cilio-retinal artery originates from the choroidal circulation or the posterior ciliary arteries, and it courses from the temporal side of the optic disc. And at times it supplies the macula, like it comes out from here, and at times it supplies the macula. Not necessarily that if the cilio-retinal artery is present, it definitely should supply the macula. It is not like that. It at times supplies. So you need to remember these points. So moving on to central retinal artery occlusion. Patients come with you with the complaints of sudden painless loss of vision, and the vision loss is quite severe when a central retinal artery is occluded. History of transient vision loss, especially if it is an arteritic case or an embolic case, you can see that they come with complaints of transient vision loss, which is also called as amaurosis fugax. They can have this history, but not necessarily it's present in all the cases of central retinal artery occlusion. Like I said, visual acuity is markedly reduced. And if the cilio-retinal artery is present and it is supplying the macula, it might be spared and the patient might not have complaints of visual acuity, but other features of the central retinal artery occlusion might be present. And relative afferent pupillary defect is present in these cases. And fundus will show narrowing of the retinal arteries, milky white retina and cherry red spot. I will explain why there is milky white retina and cherry red spot. And there is cataract tracking of the vessel, and retinal edema might be present in the acute stages. Later on, it goes into atrophic retina. So like you can see in this picture, the retina is pale. The normal retina should look something of this color, but here you can see there is pale retina and there is cherry red spot. Pale retina is present because the ganglionic cell layer, which is the superficial layer present in the retina, is opacified. And that is due to ischemia, and that leads to a pale appearance of the retina. Because the central retinal artery is occluded, or the entire retina is pale, and not just one side or one part or one sector. So the entire retina is pale in a central retinal artery occlusion. Apart from that, why do you see a cherry red spot is an important viva question they ask you. When the whole retina is pale, why shouldn't the macula or the fovea be pale? First point is that the ganglionic cell layer, which is opacified elsewhere, is not present in the fovea. So you don't see pallor. And apart from that, the retinal vasculature is not there. The fovea is an avascular structure, but the underlying choroid is still intact. And that is why you see a cherry red spot. 2 points. One, the ganglion cell layer is not present, which is opacified in the rest of the retina. And choroidal circulation is still intact. So you see a cherry red spot in a central retinal artery occlusion. If there is cilio-retinal artery is still patent in a central retinal artery occlusion, you can see that the part of the retina is pale, whereas the cilio-retinal artery area is still having circulation, and it is also supplying the macula in this case. So they might not suffer with severe occlusion in this pattern. Another sign that is very typical of artery occlusion is the cattle tracking of the vessel, which you can see here. That is, there are segments of non-perfused area and perfused area, or there is flow in certain amount, a certain part of the artery, and there is no flow in certain part of the artery. So this is called as cattle tracking sign. So apart from that, when you investigate the patient in a CRAO, that is central retinal artery occlusion, in an acute phase, you see that the inner layers of the retina are hyperreflective. Again, it's important here to remember, like I said, the posterior or the inner parts of the retina is supplied by the retinal artery, whereas the outer part of the retina, which is retinal pigment epithelium and the photoreceptor layers, is supplied by the choroidal circulation. So that is not affected in here. You can see in this picture. So FFA will show delay in the arterial filling. At 1 minute, it is supposed to be in delayed venous filling, but it is still in the arteries. The filling is still in the arteries, so you can see that it is delayed filling. You might think that CRAO should show no filling in the arteries. It is not such. The entire artery might not be occluded in most of the cases. So there is a slight amount of filling or gradual filling in the arteries that can be seen, which is late. So that is a classic feature of CRAO. So next, moving on to branch retinal artery occlusion. The most common cause for branch retinal artery occlusion is emboli. And the retina, which is distal to the occlusion, will be pale and edematous. And the arteries are narrowed in that area. In later phases or in chronic phases, the retina in that part will be atrophy. Here you can see that there is sectoral pallor. The macula remains unaffected here, and you can see the embolus at the bifurcation. So how do we manage arterial occlusions? First of all, you should understand that it's an emergency, especially central retinal artery occlusion is an emergency. You should understand that, you should be alert. So when somebody's complaining of sudden painless loss of vision, so you should always keep this diagnosis in mind. You should be alert and you should treat them appropriately. And how you should evaluate, like I told you, the etiology of central retinal artery occlusion is quite systemic in nature. So you need to do a systemic workup thoroughly, and you should see the body in toto, because if the occlusion can occur in the retinal artery, it can occur anywhere else. It can occur in your arteries that are supplying your heart, that might lead to stroke, or arteries that are supplying in the brain that might lead to stroke. So you need to be aware of that. It's not just a small artery that is being occluded in the eye. It can occur anywhere in the body. So you need to be aware of the etiology and you need to work up in that direction. You should always rule out giant cell arteritis, like I told you. And especially if you're suspecting an embolic phenomena, then you should go ahead and order an MRI to see if there are any other arterial occlusions present in the brain. And carotid Doppler will give you if there is any atheromatous plaques that are present in the carotid that might lead to future blocks and future strokes in the brain. And 2D echo to rule out any stroke present, blocks present in the heart. And hypercoagulability, especially if the patient is young, and if they give you family history of loss of vision or any other strokes, then you should evaluate them for thrombophilia. And you should also always rule out infections and tumors. So once you've done with diagnosing the patient of CRAO, how do you manage the case? However, there is no specific protocol that has been established to managing CRAO. There are multiple options that are present. You have to individualize to each case. You cannot go about giving all of the treatment options in one patient. You should try to establish the etiology and try to give the treatment in that direction. So ocular massage, you press on the eye for about 10 to 15 seconds and then do a sudden release. That will cause vasodilation in the eye. So you can try that. Apart from that, hyperbaric oxygen can be given and sublingual isosorbate dinitrate can be given, all of them causing vasodilation. And sudden release of pressure in the eye can also give you improved perfusion. So you can do that with anterior chamber paracentesis. That is, you can take a small needle and push it into the anterior chamber, which will cause sudden release in pressure. Apart from that, you can use IV acetazolamide, mannitol, or oral glycerol, which will also cause sudden fall of intraocular pressure. If you're suspecting arteritis, which is inflammation in the arteries or the vessels, you can give steroids, which is usually given in high doses, and laser photodisruption. That is, if you see an emboli, you can attempt to do laser at that part, which will cause disruption of the emboli from that location. One of the complications that is encountered in chronic CRAO cases is neovascular glaucoma. You should be aware of it, and you should look for it when you're keeping the patients in follow-up. So that was about arterial occlusions. Then we are going to venous occlusions. They are more common than arterial occlusions, and they're commonly seen in 6 to 7 decade. The pressure, what the common pathophysiology is the central retinal vein that we have seen, which is right beside the central retinal artery, might be pressed upon by the central retinal artery or the surrounding fibrotic layers that are present. Or other than that, it might be atherosclerosis that is causing the vessel occlusions, and also AV crossings that are present in the retina. Sometimes the artery might press upon the vein, which will cause the occlusion. So certain risk factors are present for venous occlusions, like elderly age group, hypertensive and diabetic patients, hyperviscous blood, periphlebitis, that is inflammation in the vein, raised intraocular pressure, oral contraceptive pills, smoking, cellulitis, tumors, and cavernous sinus thrombosis. All these are risk factors. So especially a patient with these underlying risk factors has arterial thickening, or if there is any sort of inflammation, then they're prone to developing venous occlusions. So venous occlusions can be at various levels. If it is at the central retinal vein level, then it causes central retinal vein occlusion features. If it is at the hemicentral retinal vein, then it causes hemiretinal vein occlusions. If it is at the level of the branches, then it causes branch retinal vein occlusions. So you need to understand the anatomy of the veins to understand where you will see the features and why it is only seen in that area. Also, central retinal vein occlusions are commonly divided into non-ischemic type and the ischemic type. Ischemic type is also called as hemorrhagic retinopathy, and non-ischemic type is also called as venous stasis retinopathy. So differentiating between non-ischemic and ischemic is important. The more commonly encountered one is the non-ischemic. The visual acuity is slightly better when compared to the ischemic CRVO. RAPD is usually not there, whereas relative afferent pupillary defect is usually marked and it's usually present in ischemic type. The fundus changes are milder in non-ischemic type, whereas they are severe in the ischemic type of CRVO. When you're trying to do a angiography, there is good perfusion in non-ischemic. It is ischemic and therefore there is poor perfusion. That is how you need to remember. And electroretinogram is usually normal in non-ischemic type, whereas the B waves are abnormal in the ischemic types. And complications are quite common with the ischemic type. So the features of retinal venous occlusions are venous congestion, tortuosity of the vessels, and hemorrhages, which you should remember. They're severe in ischemic type of CRVOs and less severe in non-ischemic types of CRVOs. So that is how you need to remember them. Apart from that, what you don't see in the arterial occlusions is disc edema and hyperemia, which is commonly encountered in the venous occlusions, and macula is severely edematous in the ischemic type of CRVO. This is all these changes are seen in the early cases. Whereas when you're keeping the when they come late phases, when they come to you with sheathing around the veins or collaterals which have already developed, or chronic cystoid edema, and in the ischemic type of CRVO, and neovascularization of the disc and neovascularization of elsewhere can be seen as a complication. Neovascularization is commonly not seen in a non-ischemic type. So why neovascularization develops is when there is ischemia, underlying ischemia, neovascularization develops due to production of anti-VEGF. So when there is ischemia, there is production of anti-VEGF and there is neovascularization. So I would like you to see the picture for a minute and tell me which is non-ischemic type and which is ischemic type. So this is non-ischemic type of CRVO and this is ischemic type of CRVO. First of all, understand why are we calling it a central retinal vein occlusion? Because the features are present in all the quadrants. It is probably involving the vein or the artery, let's suppose. But why are we calling it vein? Because we can see multiple hemorrhages present. In here, we can see hyperemia of the disc, macular edema being present. So all these features are suggesting you of venous occlusions, and because the features are present in all the quadrants, you're calling it a central retinal venous occlusion. You need to differentiate it from diabetic retinopathy, which will also have microaneurysms and small hemorrhages. How do you differentiate is that Diabetic retinopathy is commonly bilateral in condition, whereas central retinal vein occlusions or any arterial occlusions are usually unilateral. They might develop in the other eye in later point of time, but when presenting, they're usually unilateral. So that gives you a clinching diagnosis. And ocular ischemic syndrome also has multiple hemorrhages present, but they're present only in the mid-periphery area and not in the entire retina like seen in this picture. So this is how you differentiate between an ischemic CRVO and a non-ischemic CRVO. And this is a splash tomato appearance like you see in this picture. So complications of CRVO, especially ischemic CRVO, is rubeosis iris. That is, if the neovascularization is present in the anterior chamber at the level of iris, or it causes neovascular glaucoma. And it is usually seen as a chronic feature or a little late feature, which develops within 3 months of CRVO. So it is also called as 90 days glaucoma. Apart from that, there are other complications like vitreous hemorrhage and proliferative retinopathy that might occur. So that was about central retinal vein occlusion. Then we move on to the branch retinal vein occlusion. So I want you to look at the picture and tell me which of this is having the poor visual acuity or poor vision, or which of this case has got a better visual acuity, whatever you choose to tell. Anybody who can answer? Let's label them as 1, 2, and 3. Which of this picture has got better visual acuity? Can anybody answer that? Okay. So why are we calling it as branch retinal vein? Understand that it's present only in one quadrant or one sector of the retina. So it's occluding only the branch and not the central retinal vein. So that is first thing. Second, the visual acuity is dependent on the macular area and not the periphery of the retina. So if the macular area is unaffected by the branch that is occluded, then the vision is good enough. So here, even though you see hemorrhages in a very small area, the macular area is affected, so the vision is still bad. Here, the superior temporal branched vein is occluded. The macula is having edema, so here also the vision is bad. Here again, superior temporal vein is occluded, and again the macula is involved, so here also the vision is bad. So don't assume that if it is involving a bigger area, the vision is probably bad, and if it's involving a smaller area, the vision is probably good. It's not like that. It's dependent on the macular area involvement, if it is present or not. So that is what you need to remember and emphasize upon. And this will help you as to how to manage the patient, because what they are concerned about is the vision that they have rather than what is present in the retinal fundus image. So retinal edema and hemorrhages are limited to one area. That's why we are calling it as branch. Secondary glaucomatous changes are quite rare because you're not seeing ischemia changes or neovascularization in these cases. Collaterals will be developed in this case also. And chronic macular edema might be present, and neovascularization can or cannot occur. So once you've diagnosed it as BRVO, branch retinal vein occlusion, or central retinal vein occlusion, how should you do the management? Ocular examination should be done in thorough. Visual acuity should be measured for every patient who walks into the OP, and intraocular pressure should be measured. Especially in a chronic case, when you're suspecting neovascular glaucoma, you should examine the iris and the angles for any presence of neovascularization with the help of slit lamp for neovascularization of iris and with the help of gonioscopy for neovascularization of the angle. So that is how you need to look for them and predict if they can go into neovascular glaucoma and treat them accordingly. So fundus examination will give you clues as to what vessel is occluded and how you should manage the patient. And systemic risk factors like hypertension, diabetes, lipid profile, all of them should be done and should be managed accordingly. And Goldman's perimetry for visual fields, fundus fluorescein angiography to see which vessel is occluded and if there is any ischemia present or not. Ischemia, if present, it will show you as non-perfused areas, and OCT like seen in this picture. What is important is whether the foveal contour is maintained, whether the macula is intact, and whether the patient is having good vision or not. Here you can see that the macular area is involved. There is edema in this area, You can see layers of the retina being edematous and there is fluid collection. So the vision of this patient will definitely be poor and you need to manage them actively. So in terms of treating the patient with a venous occlusion, you need to do three things. One, the systemic and the ocular association. Systemic, that is hypertension, diabetes, lipids, should be managed. Ocular associations like glaucoma and neovascularization should be managed. So you need to keep the patient under observation if you're not treating them at the first point and monitor them for complications and further progression of the disease. And if macular edema is present, you need to treat it. If retinal neovascularization is present, you need to treat it. So how do you treat the neovascularization? Like I said, VEGF production will cause neovascularization. You need to give them anti-VEGF agents like bevacizumab or ranibizumab can be given intravitreally. That is, you inject into the eye. And intravitreal steroids. Steroids are also effective in curtailing the neovascularization, so you can give steroids. VEGFs are very costly, so the patient might not be able to afford in every scenario. So you can give them steroids, which are almost equally effective, if not the same. Apart from that, there are sustained release implants. These injections need to be repeated because their effect is short-lived. So you need to repeat them based on the improvement of the patient. They might even need 4 to 6 injections or even more than that. So you can choose to give them a slow release implant, which will have a relatively longer duration of action. So apart from that, if there is macular edema, you can do laser, grid laser in BRVO. There is no point of doing a grid laser in central retinal vein occlusion. If there is CRVO, that means all the quadrants are involved. So you cannot do just a macular grid laser in order to treat a macular edema in CRVO. But if it is a BRVO case, that is a branch retinal vein is occluded, then you can go ahead and give grid laser. Panretinal photocoagulation can be given, but it is not prophylactically done. Suppose the patient is having CRVO, that is central retinal vein occlusion. You want to give them panretinal photocoagulation. When do you give them? You give them if there is neovascularization, number one. And if the neovascularization is not noted, don't do a PRP thinking that it will prevent neovascularization. That is not the case. So what I'm trying to say is that it's not prophylactically done. But if you note a neovascularization, you can do a PRP. Apart from that, scattered laser can be done in a branch retinal vein occlusion. So if there is a branch retinal vein occlusion, neovascularization is a pretty rare entity. But if it is there, then you can do a laser at that point. That is called a scattered laser. So if there is any complication of vein occlusions like vitreous hemorrhage, you can do a vitrectomy surgery and clear the media so that the patient will have a better vision. So that was about vessel occlusions. I hope the class was clear. If you have any doubts, please do ask. If you don't have doubts, we'll move on to the questions that have been dictated previously. I think first we'll go about dictating the question for the next class. Can one person respond?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. So we'll dictate the questions for today, first of all. Then I'll go on asking about the previous questions. So please note down the question. The first one, ocular manifestations and management of chemical injuries. Ocular manifestations and management of chemical injuries is the first question. Second question, short notes on different types of optic atrophy. Second question, short notes on different types of optic atrophy. Third question, Vision 2020. Third question is Vision 2020. Fourth question, classify diabetic retinopathy and write about its fundus findings and management. Fourth question, classify diabetic retinopathy Write about its fundus findings and management. I'll repeat the fourth question again. Classify diabetic retinopathy. Write about its fundus findings and its management. Fifth question. Write a short note on anti-glaucoma drugs. Fifth question. Write a short note on anti-glaucoma drugs. Sixth question. Etiology, clinical manifestations, and treatment of optic neuritis. Sixth question. Etiology, clinical manifestations, and treatment of optic neuritis. I hope the questions were clear. If any question was not clear, please let me know the number. I'll repeat the question.
First one, ma'am.
First one, okay. Note down the first question. Ocular manifestations and management of chemical injuries. Ocular manifestations and management of chemical injuries. So that was about today's questions.